said, hey folks, I'm coming to Georgia, going to Valdosta. I can't live on base because they don't have quarters for married students. And at the time, there's an office in the Air Force called Family Affairs, Family Services, and they keep a brochure on every base, talks about its mission, and in the very back are realty listings. And I went to the bulletin and went to the back, houses, condos, apartments, and I said, oh, I'm not going to have any problem. Very last page, a block about like that said for colored. Contact somebody at a service station and somebody else at a beauty shop. And I said, I'm an officer in the United States Air Force defending democracy and freedom. And I've got to go back to this segregated society. Imagine how you would feel, you know. And I had a resolve, though, that if I went down there, I laughed because in your oath of enlistment, you say, I will defend my country against all enemies, foreign and domestic. So I said, the domestics will not be bothered without consequences. Mm-hmm. So, I haven't told this story, but in Germany I was over part of a tactical control group, and we had our own arms room and weapons. And while there, we switched from the old M1 to the new M14s. So we had all this surplus ammunition for the M1, which is 30-06, a hunter's round, but still jacketed. That's the only difference. So I said, I need something that will fire 30-06. So I go to the Rod and Gun Club, buy me a 30-06 5-shot clip. That's the biggest I could get at the time. Went back to the arms room. I know the sergeant. We still have any of that 30 caliber surplus stuff? Yeah. I need some. He said, help yourself. Ammunition boxes, wooden boxes about like this. I walked out of there with 2 unopened boxes of 30-06. That's close to 750 rounds. And at that time, I was authorized to ship in my personal household goods ammunition. I could ship 1,000 rounds of personal ammunition in my personal effects. And I shipped back 1,000 rounds of personal ammo to Valdosta, Georgia. So if you start anything, bring a lunch, because we're going to be here a while, you know. But I got there, and being an outsider was different. And being an officer, the Chamber of Commerce has a little welcoming for all the new classes starting, and you're introduced to the city fathers. So I was Lieutenant Anderson, you know, not a local person. And that did make a difference. I saw it, you know. And I did live in the new colored subdivision in a 3-bedroom house that I rented from another sergeant that was going to Germany. And he said, just pay the house note. And at that time, the house note was $57 a month, which was a lot of money on my salary back then. But that's why I stayed for my training of 13 months. My wife was expecting, again, when we returned to the States. So I had a 3-year-old. Second baby was born in August after returning in June. No, October. So I had a newborn, and my wife's brother, who was 13, was living with us that school year. So I'm 25 years old, a wife, a 3-year-old, a newborn, a 13-year-old, and in pilot's training in Valdosta, Georgia, at 25. So I don't think I know of many young people today who would take that on, you know. Yeah, who would take that on. And my wife got sick after the newborn was about 3 months old. Had to be hospitalized. What am I going to do? My aunt in Savannah says, I called her. She says, hey, the regional hospital for the Air Force is right here in Savannah at the air base. We can get the wife, put her in the hospital here. We'll keep the babies. You and your brother-in-law can visit on weekends. Now, had I been anywhere else but Moody Air Force Base in Valdosta, Georgia, you hear what I'm saying? The results probably would be a lot different. That's why I had to go to Moody Air Force Base, which I thought was a real bad deal. But when you look back, I say, thank you, Lord, you know. And that's the way it goes. That's the way it goes. So my life goes on from there, and I could recite many, many stories like that where
What kind of planes did you fly in the Air Force?
My first assignment was air refueler, KC-135 air refueler. We were your flying gas station. And this was during the Vietnam conflict. So I would spend anywhere from 3 to 5 months a year temporary duty to Southeast Asia doing refueling missions for the airplanes and bombers over there. I never set foot in Vietnam, but I've seen it all from the air, many times. And my first assignment was KC-135Q model airplane, which carried fuel for the SR-71 reconnaissance airplane, the Blackbird, the fastest airplane in the inventory, the highest flying. We carried the special fuel for that airplane, and that was over Southeast Asia also. And that was based out of Okinawa primarily, and that's a long trek from Okinawa to in-country and back again for the tanker. And then there was a program called Young Tiger where we went over to support the fighters and the bombers, and we flew principally out of Thailand, Utapao Air Base in Thailand. Refueling B-52s, F-4s, F-5s, F-100s, a little bit of everything. So when asked what did I do during the war, I flew around passing gas. That was my primary mission, right.
When did you leave the Air Force, and what did you do after that?
My flying career in the Air Force basically ended when I went to graduate school, Air Force Institute of Technology, and got a master's degree in logistics management. And from that point on, I was basically in headquarters jobs. Logistics management, things involving logistics, emergency war order planning and supporting war plans at the 8th Air Force headquarters in Louisiana, Barksdale Air Force Base in Bossier City. Then I got into aircraft maintenance. I became a maintenance squadron commander in England, Alconbury Air Base, England. And I was promoted to colonel in that job and moved from there to South Dakota as a deputy director of aircraft maintenance, and finally the director of aircraft maintenance there. And from there to SAC headquarters in logistics planning. And I retired in 1990 from the Strategic Air Command headquarters in Omaha, Nebraska. And that ended my Air Force career officially. But career didn't end. 10 days later, I went to work in a job in St. Louis, Missouri, totally different from my previous experiences, in a program called Job Corps, youth training, which was totally different from anything I'd ever done before. At a Job Corps center in St. Louis, Missouri, St. Louis Job Corps Center. The Job Corps centers are under the Department of Labor, but each center is operated by a contractor that contracts with the Department of Labor. And the contractor that I worked for, called Minact Inc., is headquartered in Jackson, Mississippi. And I saw that as an opportunity to get back to Jackson, Mississippi with a job. And I spent 1 year in St. Louis and was transferred to the corporate offices in Jackson, Mississippi. And I worked for Minact until about 1998. And I called myself officially retiring. I was called back by the CEO and president of Minact, B.T. Jones, the new Nissan plant in Canton. He and Yates Construction were awarded the contract for logistics support for the entire plant up there. So I was among 5 people, the first 5 people hired to go up and set up that program in the new plant, which was still under construction at that time. And that was a very interesting position, but it turned out I was in a planning meeting every morning at 7 o'clock and didn't get home in the evenings until about 7 o'clock. And had they given me that opportunity early in my life, it would have been fine, but I was at the wrong stage of my life to work like that. So I officially retired. Went to the Social Security office and turned myself in. And didn't do anything though. I got involved in mentoring with young people. I recognized the need for giving back. I know when I was coming along and got interested in aviation, I didn't know anybody. I met one person that modeled airplanes. That's how I got interested in airplanes. Saw these airplane models and wanted to do that, and made that a life's pursuit. And I wanted to reach the point in my life where I wanted to give back. And I don't know whether you've heard of the I Too Can Fly program, which was over in Midtown Community Development, which got state recognitions for the Innovative Training Program, Governor's Award. And that was about 2007? 2008. And that was very rewarding. So I did some mentoring over at Rowan, which is right next door to Brown. And our first students in the I Too Can Fly program were 5th graders going to Rowan in the summer, at a 6-week summer program where the kids knew nothing about flying, had maybe seen an airplane fly over. And in 6 weeks, they went from nothing to could tell you the parts of the airplane, the control surfaces, the forces, Bernoulli's principle of flight, desktop flying, radio control flying, and graduation ceremony. They got to sit at the controls of a Cessna 172 and actually fly the airplane in 6 weeks. So that was very rewarding. And I still am working with 2 of the young men in that program. The others have sort of dispersed from the area and going to other places. So I'm still connected and involved. And as you know, I have an interest in the Ferris Street Historic District.
What's your relationship to the Ferris Street Historic District?
Ferris Street Missionary Baptist Church at 619 North Ferris Street is where I was baptized in 1950. So I've been associated with that church earlier than that. And I saw the life on Ferris Street at that time and can remember it well.
And what's your earliest memories of Ferris Street?
My earliest memories go back to going to the movie, the Amit Theater, which was on Amit Street. My earliest memory. And interestingly enough, at that time, which is like 1948, 49, at that time there were 4 black theaters, 3 in the Ferris Street Historic District and 1 out here on Lynch Street. The Grand at that time. I think it later became known as the Ebony. But we had the Amit, the Alamo, and the Booker T. And there was another theater called the Ritz that was up near Ferris Street Church, which I never attended. But that was all in the colored community.
What were these theaters like?
Nothing like we see today. By today's comparisons, rather small. But the audiences weren't as large as they are today either, population-wise. And because there were so many, you wouldn't have the crowds that you see today. You know?
Are there specific events and people, places that stand out in your mind about Ferris Street?
Yes. I remember Stephen's Kitchen, which was almost directly across the street from our church. And I look forward to going over there after church services and partaking of the good meals. There was Harmon's Drugstore, which was in the adjacent building, I believe, or 2 buildings down, which had a soda fountain. And my uncle's girlfriend at the time worked there. So that was a favorite place to go and get fountain treats at that time. And those are some of my fondest memories as a child on Ferris Street. And of course, when I came back to college, Ferris Street was still alive and doing well. And of course, we'd go there. Down there at that time, I could go to the movies and eateries along Ferris Street. And there were some clubs down there too.
Did you go to some of those clubs, and what were they like?
There were places like the Crystal Palace, which is, I think we know as Birdland today, or was Birdland. I can remember that one. There was Pool Room, Cafe. The Big Apple and Big John's was down there. And I can remember going to those places there.
Were there people that stand out in your memory about Ferris Street?
I can remember Richard Beadle, who was the photographer, which was also a relative. And I can remember going to his studios and having our family pictures made. There was a Dodson's barber shop, which was my grandfather's barber. He would take me down there with him when I was a youngster, and Dr. Harmon at Harmon's Drugs that I mentioned before, Dr. McCoy, the dentist. All of those activities were down on Ferris Street or in the area. And of course, for deaths in the family, you'd go to the funeral homes along Ferris Street, and my family principally went to People's Funeral Home up on the north end of Ferris Street.
If you had to paint a picture of what Ferris Street was like then, how would you describe it?
It was the center of commercial activity for the black community in Jackson. On a weekend, on a Saturday after 12 o'clock, down on Ferris Street, it would be shoulder to shoulder on the sidewalks, and the cars in the street are bumper to bumper. Activities everywhere. You would have the sidewalk entertainment, sidewalk vendors, in addition to the established businesses down there. So it was the hub of life. It was an area where you could find all the essentials necessary for life in terms of grocery stores, clothing stores, furniture stores, medical services. There was even a health clinic on Ferris Street. Whatever you needed to conduct daily life, you could find right there in that area.
Did they have a style that you would associate with Ferris Street? Was there something specific that made it special beyond the activity?
Well, I think in my early life, it was just the hustle and bustle and seeing the different people and all of the activities going on. I can remember an area, what is that, Hamilton, right off Fair Street and Mill Street. There was a big vacant area back there where the traveling minstrel shows would come and set up the big tents, and that would draw crowds. So it was a center of life down in that area.
What did it feel like to be there?
Well, for me, it was my normal everyday existence, but it was always exciting when you could leave Pittsburgh Street and go downtown and get in the midst of all of that activity and visit some of those places like the soda fountain and the restaurants to eat, which was very special.
What do you think's the most important thing that we should remember about how Ferris Street was?
I think it should be remembered for what its history and legacy of the start of the black community in Jackson. While I'm not a historian, I do read some, and I've been around a few years, and I've heard stories and I've seen things.